What is up, everybody? Good evening. Hope your evening's about to get a little bit better. I got Marco Martinez in the building with me tonight. We got some things to discuss. We're going to talk a little bit about George Kittle and his weight loss / weight gain journey. A little bit interesting. We're going to talk about the budding rivalry with the Green Bay Packers that the 49ers have here. I think this one's good because you've got two young quarterbacks that are going to grow together. This should be a fun rivalry for quite some time. And then we're going to give our top 10 49ers, and we're going to close out with an article from The Athletic talking about how the 49ers were big losers this offseason. We'll discuss that plus more, and we're going to do it all next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports. We are giving you our take down to the last second. And as I said, it's Thursday night, which means I got my guy, Marco Martinez, in the building. What's up, Marco?
What up? How's it going, my man?
Great, man. Really, really good. Missed you last week. You still sound a little bit sick. That's crazy.
Yeah, still a little congested, man, but nothing crazy, nothing too crazy. Last Thursday, man, if I would have been on the show, it would have been like pure sniffling and pure blowing my nose. So definitely wasn't a great time to go. But first, main question, the main part of the question was, happy birthday to your son. How does his day go today? What'd you do for him? What special things did you do to make your son's birthday, man? That's the most important part.
Yeah, yes, sir, yes, sir. So he turned 10 years old today. We actually celebrated his birthday 2 weekends ago because this last weekend I had knee surgery, or this last Friday, and we didn't know how I would do. So usually it's every Father's Day is when we celebrate his birthday. This is the first year, I think, in his whole entire life we haven't done it on Father's Day. But I digress. He had a fantastic day. He had already gotten all of his gifts. I'm taking him to the Ravens-Bucks Monday Night Football game. That's what we got him. We went to Dick's and got him some new baseball gear. He's getting ready for the baseball season and just made him his favorite meals and had a good time with them. So, yeah, he had a great day.
What was his reaction? Did you at least get a video of his reaction to getting those tickets?
No, we didn't take a video of it, but listen, he's all ravened out. He's definitely a Ravens fan. It's over. I got no chance at this point, but he was very excited. Yes, and probably just as excited that he gets to skip school the next day. Because think about it, the Monday night game here doesn't start till 8:30, so we're not getting home till like 1 a.m. at that point.
Man, that's cool. Because I know when you first got the tickets, I think we were backstage and we're talking about it, and you're like whispering, I don't know if he's still awake or if he can hear me or not. So that's pretty cool. Like that he finally got that gift, man. Happy birthday to your son. Hope you had a great 10th birthday, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you. He's definitely feeling the love today for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the 49ers, though. This one's interesting. George Kittle loses 30 pounds. He couldn't do any weightlifting for a month. He had a core muscle surgery, and then he had a shoulder surgery. So he couldn't lift any weights for a month. He said he lost 30 pounds of muscle. I don't think he lost 30 pounds of muscle. I don't think that's a realistic loss in a month. And I definitely don't think it's realistic to gain 20 pounds of muscle in a month and a half, unless you're on a little sauce or something. So I think he probably lost 30 pounds, which is still a lot of weight, and you've got to rehydrate and gain all that back and definitely gain some of that muscle back. What do you think? You told me about this core muscle surgery months ago before it was reported, and I didn't know how serious it could be. It sounds like he's healthy now for the most part, or is getting there, but this is a whole offseason spent rehabbing. And George Kittle in the past has talked about how much he hates getting surgeries in the offseason because he hates rehabbing, and it takes away from his growth for the next season. So do you think this is going to hinder George Kittle? Do you expect him to be good for training camp? Like, what are your thoughts?
He should be good for training camp. He was out there at the tight end U running routes and catching passes. So his recovery should be a lot ahead of schedule. So I'm not just like ahead of schedule. The fact that he's running routes out there, catching passes, I saw a couple of videos of him jumping up and down. That's a good sign. Now, the biggest issue is he could have a setback from any time in a training camp. We don't know what his recovery process is like or what his rehab schedule is supposed to be like. Is he ahead of schedule? Is he on time or is he behind? So that's the biggest thing for George Kittle, right? Like you said, losing 30 pounds isn't good. Like now you got to get back to that strength. Now these guys are super athletes where he'll get that strength back really fast. You really don't lose much in that point, but it's just hard to see a player lose 30 pounds and not be able to get better because he's going into the year 30. Was it year 31, 32 season?
I think he's 30. I think he's 31. Yeah.
So we're going into those years of his career where typically you see players decline. Now, tight ends, I believe he'll be 31 in October. So tight ends usually they could stay afloat until 35. I mean, we've seen Travis Kelsey going crazy still. But the thing is Niners did not have injuries last year. And if they did, the players were playing through them. Look
Mm-hmm.
at Charvarius Ward, George Kittle. This one of their offensive linemen was playing with a banged up ankle injury, knee injury the entire year. I believe it was
Yeah. Banks.
Burford or Banks. Banks, huh?
Banks. Yeah. Banks. Yeah. Remember he had the, I think he had like a bicep injury and then he came back and hurt his ankle or something. Yeah. He was hurt all year as well.
So like the likelihood of him getting hurt is a lot higher now coming off of rehab because you're not coming into camp in shape technically because you're rehabbing. You're not getting into football shape. You're more so getting into shape where your body is fully recovered. So for me, George Kittle injury and his recovery process and everything that's going on is worrisome. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's George Kittle. It's worrisome. When your player's having surgery and he says he loses 30 pounds, that means he wasn't able to truly recover. Now they did get Logan Thomas, so that should help them where they don't have to rush George Kittle for the first week of the season. But man, what are your thoughts on George Kittle? That's a lot of weight, man. That's really, really a lot of weight.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I thought of was he's carrying way more weight than his natural body is built for. Like he did come into college, I believe, as a wide receiver. So he's actually probably built naturally like a wide receiver. Now, I mean, that's not that uncommon. You see it with offensive linemen in particular, defensive linemen sometimes, but they carry a bunch of extra weight, and as soon as they retire, they lose a bunch of weight. Staley comes to mind. We saw same thing for the left tackle for the Browns. He lost a ton of weight. So that's not that uncommon, but 30 pounds, if you lose 30 pounds in a month, that's your body naturally saying this is not the weight that you should carry. And some of that, I believe, whether it's good weight or bad weight, doesn't matter. When your body is naturally smaller by 30 pounds than what you've been carrying, I think that can lead to some of the injuries he's had. I think his body's not, your joints are only meant to carry so much. Your body's designed to do what it's supposed to do. So if you're carrying 30 pounds extra, good weight or bad weight, that wears on your knees, that wears on your ankles. Like over time, that can hurt you. And I know that you said tight ends can play till they're 35. Maybe Kittle can, but tight ends also come in all shapes and sizes. Gronkowski played a physical brand of football. He was basically shot by the time he was 30. And I think Kittle is closer to the Gronkowski playing style than he is the Kelsey playing style. I like what Harris had to say here. He says we should use him as a receiver more. I think this comment rings more true in a season where he is coming off of some serious injuries. I would like to see him use the receiver more. Unfortunately, the 49ers didn't upgrade their offensive line, so he's probably not going to be used as a receiver more. He's still probably going to block a ton, and we'll see. But last year was the first time in a few years he did make it through the full season, so that's something we should be looking out for.
So I actually looked it up, and I guess George Kittle, his weight at Iowa, he came in looking at like a 200 pounds. When he was at Iowa, he's 250 now. So obviously that's 50 pounds that as an 18-year-old, he was coming into college. And obviously,
now, some of that's man
developed.
muscles, right? You probably
Yeah.
get 20 pounds of man muscle, whatever, normal.
So that does make sense, losing 30 pounds. Like you're saying, like his natural body probably sits around 220, 225 with the man muscles, like in growing into his man body. That's just crazy. Like just losing that much weight. Like, is it good for him? Was it bad, or did he get sick? You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you rehab a certain body part, a core, your body starts to reject things. Like, does his body reject the surgery for a little bit? Did he have any infections that caused him to lose weight? Like, we truly don't know.
You don't know
what he lost the weight from. So it's kind of like more speculation in terms of, all right, how did he lose the weight? Was it just because he couldn't move and he was laying in bed, and he wasn't really eating as he normally does because he didn't want to gain weight? Just very interesting, man. Tight end I saw him running around. He looked normal. Um, but till this day, I will not get out what Jay Harp told me about his core injury and how he never recovered the same. And he was like, man, there was days, there was months where I felt like myself. He goes, and then once the pads came on and everything started moving and I was trying to get back to my normal self, he goes, I wasn't myself, man. And you go and you people could go turn on the tape of Jay Harp in college. He was a legit receiver.
Yeah.
Once that injury happened, a lot could be said and talked about that injury and how it changed his career. So how does this change Kittle's career? That's my perspective right now, and it's not, to me, it's not great.
Yeah, core injuries are no joke. I mean, they really can cause a lot of problems. So we've got now two very good players that are going through that in an off season. Just pray that they are healthy to start the season, and we'll see how their season goes. But that's two of them. That's definitely two of them. And usually when you have a like a hernia surgery, they basically like put in like a filter, to stop things from coming out, and then they patch it back together. And they always say that it's like you really shouldn't go back to full physical activity after that because it's just not meant to hold. So I'm not gonna speculate. I'm not saying it was hernia. It was just a core surgery. It could have been,
So
however they repaired it.
the
But
thing is though is so Jay Harp, this is something he actually talked about too on the show, and that's why I'm only going to speak on it. He said when they do hernia surgery, they consider that part of the core. So
mm,
a hernia surgery for an athlete sometimes is called a core surgery. So
mm,
just because it's being called a core, we don't know if it's truly his core muscles or if
right.
it's that hernia. Because I know
Hernia.
when I talked about it on the show, he had mentioned it like, hey, actually, it's depends on where it's done. Some surgeons call it a part of the core because your hernia is connected. There's a muscle that's
Yep.
connected. So we truly don't know where it was because they're calling it a core. But you're right, it
Yeah.
could be a hernia.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. We'll see. Prayers up to George and Charvarius as well, who had a core surgery. All these guys. And hopefully they can come back healthy. The 49ers are certainly going to need them all. Dave Barclay says, I'm in Cali. Made it safely. What's up, guys? This man drove from Montana to Cali yesterday,
Oh,
watching the
geez.
shows along the way. Appreciate you, Dave. And Brother Bob says, happy B-Day to the smartest man at Nails. Was he late? Hold on. First of all, I wasn't late tonight. We started right on time, 9:05. That's when the show started. So let's throw that out there. And no, we actually chose his due date, so he wasn't late. Uh, Dave says, Brother Bob changing names again. He's always changing names, man. It's like you can't hide. We know who you are, Brother Bob. All right. Let's talk about this Keyshawn Nixon thing. Now, what I found interesting about these comments, first of all, reading the comments versus watching his demeanor when he actually said the comments are two very different things. But basically what he said is, I'm tired of Debo Samuel. That guy talks too much. Like I'm done with him. Really, it was kind of said in a joking manner. Two guys that are friends, very competitive. They mean it, but they also have love for each other, and you can tell that. But what I find most interesting about this is that there is that competitive nature with the Packers and the 49ers. And this isn't the first time he, in particular, has kind of taken shots at the 49ers. Remember, he was the one that's when they were talking about OTAs, we're like, wow, all the players are here. What's up with that? He's the one that said, hey, we're on a mission. That's why we're all here. All of these practices mean something. We feel like we let the 49ers off the hook. And now he comes out and says this again, lighthearted, but the competitive nature's there. And that as a team, really what he's doing is he's messing with a friend, but he is relaying a message of how his team feels. That's exactly how the Packers feel. It's not made up. You know what I mean? So there's that animosity, that competitive animosity. They are going to play each other this year. What are your overall thoughts of this comment? And when you first read just the quote, did you definitely take it a little bit more differently than when you actually saw the clip where he was clearly a little bit more lighthearted?
So when I initially saw the quote, I saw it as I agree.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I like because and he for me it was more so Debo's annoying. And like it was more so like Debo's always in the media. He talks about whoever he wants. No one says anything back, right? Like that's how kind of I took it. Like, all right, I agree. Like if as a fan, sometimes I just want my team just to shut up, put your head down, work, and win a bowl. Like that's my biggest thing. And
And
so
it's
Debo
always
does
Debo, by the way. It's always
always.
Debo. Always Debo.
So like when I did see it, I was like, I kind of agreed. Like I was like, yo, someone's tell him something. Like if y'all are boys, tell him something. Like because for me, the way I see it is, you can't talk if you're constantly getting somewhere and you're losing a Super Bowl, right? Or you're getting to the doorstep. And if you look at the last Super Bowl, Debo was the biggest reason the Niners weren't able to win that game, in my opinion. Like not being able to separate, like that is huge, especially when you're considered the highest paid receiver on the team. So that's kind of how I took it initially. And then when I saw the video, I was like, oh yeah, they're friends. Like he
Yeah.
joked, like he like laughed, like kind of chuckled about it. Like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
they're cool, they're friends. But I do agree with the sense of we do have to go to Lambeau. Like that's a bigger thing. Like they're not coming over here. We got to go to Lambeau in the cold weather. We got to put it on them because they probably should. If we're being 100% honest, we're talking football and we're not being biased as a 49ers fan or anything like that. They probably should have beat us in that divisional game. Like they had us on the
100%. Yes.
ropes. They we had passes that were drop pick sixes. No one really talks about it. So if you're talking about it as a fan of the sport, they probably should have beat us. So kind of how you look at it in a perspective. I thought it was funny that he said it, but and all it does is just add fire to Debo. And last time a team talked smack to Debo, he went on and dropped a masterful game on the
Mhm.
Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't know if that's the smartest decision by Nixon and the Packers, but it's definitely gonna fuel Debo during that game.
Well, I'll say this. He usually is known for coming up big against these teams where they kind of go a little bit back and forth. Although the guy he went most back and forth with was on the Detroit Lions, and he didn't have like a crazy amazing game there either. You know what I mean? So that was like a game where he easily should that started in like week 4. Him and Chauncey Gardner Johnson were going at it. And it's like, oh, we're gonna see you, we're gonna see you, we're gonna see you. Now, obviously, the 49ers got the last lap there, but ultimately Debo wasn't like this major factor in that game. He played well, but not like your typical Debo versus the Rams, Debo versus the Eagles. It wasn't one of those takeover type games. You know what I mean? So, maybe you can get away with talking a little bit of trash to Debo Samuel, but your argument about they were this close to losing that game, I can make an argument right now that I think holds some weight that the 49ers were just as close to going out in round 1 or the divisional round for them because they had a bye as they were to winning a Super Bowl. They
Oh,
were every bit as
absolutely.
close as losing the divisional round as they were to winning a Super Bowl. So
Absolutely. And I
that's
agree.
something that we don't talk like that. What we do is we look at the 49ers and what they are now and we say, "Oh, I mean, we're this close to winning a Super Bowl." I mean, really all you got to do is keep the band together and you're there. And the argument can be made that, well, yeah, but that same team easily was the argument you want to make for they were this close to winning a Super Bowl. I can also say, and they were this close to losing in the divisional round. That's the same team. So it goes both ways here.
And what's crazy about it too, and it shows, and this is like I agree with both things. I think the Niners were this close to losing in the first round, this close to winning it in the the Super Bowl. It just shows you how easy it is to lose a game, right? Or how close you could be. It's a game of inches, man. And like it's to be honest, that's to me what makes the sport so great. One wrong play, one wrong thing could flip a game. And I think that's the best thing about football because even though it's 4 quarters, 60 minutes, one thing could flip a game like that. And it's only 7 seconds, typically the length of a play, 7 to 12 seconds, that could change the game. So to me, that's the best part versus other sports. There's a lot more things that could flip a game in the NFL in the playoffs. One play changes it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I really do like this rivalry. I think for me, there's some nostalgia too. If you grew up when I grew up, mainly most of your football memories as a kid was in the 90s. And for me, that was Packers, that was Cowboys. And now we've seen the Cowboys thing kind of run its course a little bit. The 49ers clearly own that. It hasn't turned into that rivalry again. I think, and the 49ers have owned the Packers, to be fair. But now it's a new quarterback, and they've only played once. If that team beats the 49ers in the regular season, then all of a sudden you can start to make an argument like, hey, especially if we got to go to Lambeau, can we get that game done? So I think there's a lot of fun here. And I just think historic franchises, when they're both good and they're competing, I love it. And this really can be fun for many years. If Brock Purdy can be a franchise quarterback, if Jordan Love can be a franchise quarterback, you really could see this matchup 6, 7, 8 times over the course of the next 10 years. And I'm looking forward to it.
It technically could be how they were saying, like the Peyton and Tom in the AFC, like sort of that in this fashion. I'm not saying that high level of players, but essentially that's what you could see for the future. And I think Brock Purdy is going to be the better player that wins the, not necessarily, I'm going to reword that, is going to win more of those games.
I agree.
I don't think he could be the better player, but I think he could win more of those games. And the reason is I think he has a better foundation on defense that could slow down, because it's not Jordan Love versus Brock playing head to head.
It's not.
It's our defense versus Jordan Love in the Packers defense. And when I look at them, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, our secondary has a longer tenure together, and they should have another 4 or 5 years together. Versus looking at the Packers, they don't truly have a foundation on defense that I can sit here right now that's played. Now I know they've drafted some guys where I could look at them and say, for the next 5 years, they could slow Brock down.
I'll say this. I could see a scenario where the 49ers and Brock Purdy start out like 3-0 against Jordan Love, but we look up in 5 years and it's 3-3 or 4-3 type of scenario, because I think the 49ers are going to go through a little bit of a dip, and then they can easily, depending on how they draft and free agency and all these other things, they can get back there. But as they're going through that and trying to come back up, the Packers right now were here already. They're already on the incline. The 49ers are on the decline, and then they got to bounce back up. They're kind of meeting in the middle here as the Packers are going up and the 49ers are going down, and then the 49ers are going to be the team that's going to have to play catch up for a year or two, I believe, to catch the Packers, because you look at the foundation of the Packers, you've got a good young receiving core, you've got a good offensive line, good young offensive line. They've done a pretty good job of actually drafting on defense. Now, again, there's some things to be desired there, but they've got a very good secondary, three good corners, 2 good safeties, or at least 1 good safety and one that it's a rookie. You would think he would end up being pretty good. We'll see. So they've got a good foundation and a young foundation that they're building upon. So they're kind of meeting as the Niners are down and they're on their way up. Can the Niners go down and then come back up and catch them? How many years does that take? So I think things could get interesting over a 3 to 5 year span between these two teams.
So just looking at them, for me, like the players on defense that I think could be their foundational piece. Obviously, I think Xavier McKinney. I think that's a foundational piece
for sure.
I do think Cooper could be a really, really good linebacker in the NFL, but I'm not going to crown him yet because he's coming in and he's going to be a rookie. So for me,
I think
those
Bullard
are the two
could
guys.
be a good safety as well. We'll see what he turns into, but
I'm not sure on my thoughts on Bullard. I think he could be a good dude, like a good player, but I don't think he's going to be as good as a lot of people who had him as a first rounder or like that one of the top safeties on the board coming out. So that's for me looking at him like, okay, now, and then Jair Alexander, he may not be on their roster.
How old is Jair? Yeah.
28, I believe, or 27. So he's not going to be on their roster because they don't plan on keeping him. Like with his contract number, I could see them moving him and having Eric Stokes, who they were high on, being their guy to replace him at a cheaper cost. So just a lot of moving parts on their defense. Their defensive line isn't great. Their best players are Sean Gary, really good edge rusher. But for me, there's no like true top tier dogs on their defense that weekly, like they're going to play the Niners. I'm like, well, we got a game plan for this dude versus when you game plan for the Niners, you're like, oh, damn it. Fred Warner's in the middle of the field everywhere. Nick Bosa's on the defensive line. Like those are the two guys, like they changed the game. I don't think the Packers have that defensively. So that's where I'm like, you know what? The Niners may win more of those games until they fix that defense, because I do think Jordan Love could carry them, but it's going to be a much, much harder situation playing an elite defense.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. That's totally fair. Totally fair. Okay. Let's talk about top 10 list for the 49ers. I'm going to pull this up real quick, so bear with me. Okay. So CBS Sports dropped their top 100 list. And essentially, we got their order of top 10 players on the 49ers just by default. And so I'll go through those real quick, where they were ranked as far as 49ers players, and then where they were ranked overall. And then we'll drop, you tell me if you agree or disagree with the top 10 lists of the 49ers, and then what you would change afterwards. So number 3 overall player on their list, number 1 on the 49ers was Trent Williams. CMC was the second best 49er, number 8 overall in the NFL. Bosa, so they had 3 49ers in the top 10. Bosa was number 10, number 3 on the 49ers. Their number 4 player was Fred Warner at 22 overall. And then they had Kittle, who was the 5th best 49er at 37 overall. They go to Brandon Ayuk at 45 overall, the 6th best 49er. Then they go Ward, Charvarius Ward, as the 7th best 49er, number 60 overall in the NFL. They have Deebo Samuel at 81 overall in the NFL. He's the 8th best 49er. Then they have Brock Purdy as the 9th best 49er at number 85 overall. 13th best quarterback, though. And then Dre Greenlaw was an honorable mention to the top 100 list. He would have rounded out the top 10 list for the San Francisco 49ers as far as their best players. So, not here to necessarily debate where they stand in the league. That would take days, honestly, really breaking it through. And it's so hard to compare positions. I get that. But knowing what we know of the San Francisco 49ers going into this season, how would you rank your top 10 list of the 49ers? Or would you just say, hey, I agree with them? They had Trent, CMC, Bosa, Warner, Kittle, Ayuk, Ward, Deebo, Purdy, and Greenlaw. That was their 10.
And are we going based off of last year? Like, is the ranking based off of last year's performances? Is it moving forward?
So what they did is, this ranking for them is top 100 players headed into the 2024 season. So I think it's probably what they did last year and projecting kind of what you think they're going to do this year. So however you want to take that, however you want to work that, you can wordsmith around it.
So for me, I mean, I get why Trent's so high. I get it. But what we saw Trent in the Super Bowl, and if we're going to have a true conversation, Trent wasn't Trent in the Super Bowl, man.
I agree.
Like, as much as people want to kill Burford and Kit McKivitz, go back and rewatch that Super Bowl. Trent with back-to-back penalties, missing blocks in the run, where CMC's getting tackled in the backfield, whiffing on pass blocks. I don't have him as my best player on the Niners. If I'm going off of last year, I probably have Christian McCaffrey, but knowing the importance and knowing how good Nick Bosa is and him not having the offseason to fully train, Nick Bosa is number 1 on my board. I think Nick Bosa is the best player on the Niners. Then I would probably have Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
Number 3, I would then have Fred Warner. Then Trent Williams at 4. 5. Man, 5. This is hard. Probably George Kittle, where he was ranked. 6, BA. 7, I would have Purdy, so we'll move him up 1. 8, I know he didn't play much last year, but I do think this player is in my top 10, just because I think he's one of the best players on the team.
Okay.
Talanoa Hufanga.
Okay.
So I'm at 9 now.
That's 8. Yeah, so number 9. Yeah.
So
you haven't
9.
said Deebo yet.
I don't think it. I mean, is he going to be on the roster? That's my biggest question.
Let's
Number
assume he
8,
is, because he is
number
now. So
okay, he is. So number 8 or the 9, right? 9, Debo,
now number 9. Okay.
Debo, and then number 10, I think the nominal Lenore.
Oh, Demo. I like it. Okay. Oh,
I
I
think he's
like it.
better
This
than
is an
I think he's better
unconventional
than
list.
Ward. And this is me just going. This is me giving my list, not how it should be. This is my top 10 for the Niners.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think Demo. I think Demo is much better, much better than people give him credit for. I think he's the
He's
Niners'
more
best
versatile.
corner, and
More versatile.
that's exactly where I was going to go to. I like that he could go inside, outside. So if you do have those shiftier receivers, right, who typically you have some of those dudes who can line up outside. Ward's he'll match up with those guys fairly well. When they get smaller and shiftier, man, he struggles a little bit. If he don't really move inside because he knows that's not his island, he's not going to do really well inside. Demo, he don't matter. It don't matter for Demo. Like that's to me impressive. The fact that he'll come in and fill the gaps, fill the lane, and come down and fly down and hit. To be honest, Demo needs more credit around the league. No, Demo, just don't go on social media and talking all that talk though. Just stay quiet. Let your play do the talking. I promise you, within the next year and a half, people are gonna have you on notice. I promise you. Just don't talk. Go and play. You don't need to go on social media to get your clout that you're gonna get within the next year. I think he is a top 15, top 10 corner in the league.
He's good. He is really good. I love Demo. Obviously, Oregon Duck. So, keep saying good things about him. The very unconventional
That's
list,
his
and I
biggest
love it.
downfall.
I love. Oh, wow. All right. Geez, let's chill out a little bit. Okay, a very unconventional list, but I like it. I like going out on a limb, and I really what this says to me is how good the 49ers really are. How good the 49ers really are. I noticed that you left Greenlaw off your list, but I got to imagine that's because of injury.
Yeah, I think Dre Greenlaw's probably, if it's not due to injury, probably take Demo off and put him there at 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or have the
And I think
conversation
that's
of,
fair.
or even, and then at that point, if he's healthy, I might even have the conversation of taking Debo out of the top 10 and putting Dre Greenlaw at 9 or moving Demo up. Like, that's the kind of conversation I would have. Because I do think Trey Greenlaw brings something to the Niners and he brings a different energy. And those are the kind of dudes who typically are your best players. When they could lead the pack, that's how you know you're one of the top guys.
Yeah, most certainly. So again, this is like a little bit of a projection who's going to be the best players for 2024. Based off that criteria, I think you have to leave Greenlaw off your list as well, just because we don't know how many games he's going to miss and we don't know how effective he's going to be when he comes back, right? If we're just going off of best players in a vacuum, he certainly deserved to be there. We had 3 players line up identically, and the rest are completely different. So you had Bosa number 1. I had CMC. You had CMC. You had CMC number 2. I still have Trent. I know he had not a great Super Bowl. When he wasn't on the field, and I'm not saying that Bosa wouldn't have this impact, but when he wasn't on the field, I can say this. 49ers, it was bad. The drop-off between him and Jalen Moore was so scary. I went back and I was watching the Bengals game yesterday, actually. And I was watching it because I was watching Brindell. I was replying to somebody on Twitter and they said, show me some bad film of Brindell. And I said, all right, I got you. Let me go cut up this Bengals film real quick. Man, Moore is so bad. So bad. That whole game, it's like, dude, I could make a whole thing over here. So I think some of this, I'm swaying a little bit because it's like, how important are they too? That plays into it. So I had Trent number 2. This is where it got tough for me. I originally had Bosa number 3. But I put Fred Warner there.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that though. Like I'm a big Fred dude, man. Like,
yeah.
If it wasn't like I played linebacker, I played on the defensive side, so like I have a special thing for linebacker. Like, if you're a linebacker, I hold your category of how good of a football player you are a little higher. So when I talk about Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, there's a huge bias. Like whenever I talk about any linebacker, there's a bias. So
Yeah.
I almost put freaking Fred Warner at 1, and then like just everyone be like, "What are you talking about?" Like, but I didn't.
Yeah. Well, we both had him at number 3. You had Trent at number 4. I had Bosa at 4. I mean, these are so many good players. To have either of these at number 4 just seems blasphemy, but that's how good the team is up top, anyways. I went with Ayuk number 5. You had Kittle. You did have Ayuk number 6. That's where I had Debo. I think, especially this year, Debo losing the weight, being motivated for a contract, I think that we're just going to get really good version of Debo Samuel. And it's going to be unfortunate. Fans are going to hate it when he's gone at the end of the season, and wish that we could bring him back and like, oh, look at how great he is. And then he'll, get rich somewhere else, I'm sure, and have a good season, but fall back a little bit. We both do agree, though, however, we have Purdy at number 7. So that was another agreement. So we both had Fred at 3. We had Purdy at 7. You had Huff here. I had Kittle. Kittle behind Purdy was a tough one, but
looking at that, I'm like, I could see it though, because the importance of quarterback is over tight end is very
for
important.
sure. That's not even close. It's not even debatable. Not even debatable. So, okay. So Kittle at 7. I had Ward at 9, and we both had Demo at 10. Again, Greenlaw not on the list because we don't know when he's going to return, first of all, and then how he's going to look when he returns. In a vacuum, we'd both have him there. So the similarities that we had were Fred at 3, Purdy at 7, and Demo at 10. A lot of good players on this team, though, man. There's a lot of good players on this team.
For you, so rounding out your top 10, if you had to choose other lists, right, like looking at everyone else, who would be your 11th or 12th? Who like they were so close to being there? Obviously, Dre Greenlaw, but outside of a guy like that, who would you have on your list that you almost added and made your 10th person like change?
If it's not Greenlaw, again, we're kind of just leaving him as like not available.
He's honorable, yeah.
Right. So we're just gonna leave him as unavailable. I actually almost went with Floyd, man. I think he's that good.
Oh wow.
I mean, this is a guy who's consistently around 10 sacks. I think he's going to be super impactful here. I think he can usher in some interesting things for this team if they want to switch it up. He's a guy that I think can stand up and rush the passer. I think that he can have his hand in the dirt and rush the passer. So he can give them some good, interesting looks and kind of help them get creative along the line. And I think a lot of that stems with the versatility that he has. I would probably go Floyd. Floyd is the guy, yeah.
So then you had Charvarius Ward in your top 10, but you did not have Demo.
I did. I had Demo 10. I had Demo 10.
Okay, Demo 10. Okay, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I had Ward 9, Demo 10.
That's crazy. Yes, that's next time we have a show. I do want to talk about, and we'll do this next show, is do the 49ers have a top 10, top 5 cornerback duo? And we'll have that on the next show, but I just like that's just a preview for everyone.
I gotta think about that. It gives you a week. I gotta go look. Yeah,
it gives you a week to look at it. So not on the top of our heads, but to be honest, like that's the stuff that I'm like looking at right now. Like, do the Niners truly have a top 5 duo?
They got a good one. They do have a good one.
It's up there.
Some, especially now that Kansas City got broken up for sure. I mean that helps, right? That was one of the top ones. Ooh, all right. That's going to be a good topic for next week. I'm looking forward to that one. And I don't know the answer. I'm going to have to go through some of these rosters and double check some things. Brother Bob says, of course you watched the Bengals game, closet fan. Man, do you see my man Joe Burrow shredding up the Niners, bro? Come on. How couldn't you watch it? I really can't stand Joe Burrow. I think he's so overrated. I'm sorry. All right. The Athletic wrote an article. And what's interesting about this article is they only chose 5 teams for the winner section, 5 teams for the loser section. So I know this is a 49er channel, but I just want to see if we can find any flaws with their lists in general before we kind of dissect it and break it down. So as far as their 5 teams that they had that were winners this offseason, They had the Bears, the Commanders, the Lions, the Eagles, and the Bucks. I don't have a problem with their top 4. The Bucks made no sense to me. I don't know how you make a list and not have the Texans on there after the crazy improvement that they made this offseason, all the players that they went and got. And I look at the Green Bay Packers too and go, holy crap, man. I mean, you went and got younger at running back in Jacobs. You went and got a top tier safety that can help you out. I felt like they drafted really well also. I think they could potentially be on that list. The Bucks didn't make sense to me. So that was the first flaw I found. The Bears and Commanders had the first 2 picks. So as long as you like the quarterback that they took, which most people do, then you're probably going to be on board. The Lions, we can all agree. I think the Eagles, we can agree with. The Bucks was the only flaw that I really saw on their list as far as teams that were winners.
I thought the Bucks was a flaw as well. And not having the Packers to me was a major like head scratch. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like they even got better at linebacker, running back.
Right.
Like, so it's, I mean, I guess you could look at the Packers and be like, well, technically they only got Xavier McKinney because technically you're just swapping out Aaron Jones for Josh Jacobs. So like, I guess like if you look at it in that perspective, like, okay, well, I still think Xavier McKinney's a huge upgrade for that defense. So it's very interesting for me. I thought it was the one that was very interesting on being one of the biggest winners was the Lions. And like for me, that was that's my title, is talking about the Lions being the biggest winner, one of the biggest winners, and the Niners being one of the biggest losers. For me, this is interesting because I think these are the 2 best teams in the NFC. I think that's where it's like, whoa, one of our rivals in the NFC is the biggest winner. And so their reason for being the biggest winner for the Detroit Lions was obviously they re-signed Goff, St. Brown, Penei Sewell. But then they also added defensive tackle DJ Reader. They needed him bad. Edge rusher Marcus Davenport. I don't see why that was really added. Like he hasn't really done much in the last 2-3 years. Cornerback Carlton Davis, a much big upgrade for their secondary. And then they added the guard, Kevin Zeitler, but they lost the guard to the Rams. So just looking at their list, they also mentioned 2 corners they draft. So for me, looking, I'm like, hey, the Lions are knocking on the door. They really, really did get better. And I think for me, them being in the winning category and the Niners being in the losing category is very, how should I say it? What's the word I'm looking for? Ironic. I'm going to go with ironic because the Niners beat them in the NFC. So Niners truly are the real winners. And the Detroit Lions were the losers. But then in the offseason, one team did everything they needed to get better. And another team, coming from the head coach, Kyle Shanahan, said, we just wanted to not get worse. Our goal was to not get worse. If you're not getting, this is a quote that I live by. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And that's every day. If you didn't get better at something you did yesterday, you're getting worse. So the Niners typically, they technically got worse. What are your thoughts on the Niners being in the losing category?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is, 49er fans, and it's fair. I mean, it actually happened, right? Almost could have, would have. But as much as you want to get into we were almost champions, you can get into, we also almost lost in the divisional round. Like that, those 2 things are as equally true as each other, right? Neither of them happened. They didn't win the Super Bowl and they didn't lose in the divisional round. But I think both of those were as close to happening as each other. So when you look at that, that tells me that you have a team that does need to improve. And you have a team that isn't quite there. And the AFC, thank God for the AFC really just being the conference right now and knowing that you only have to beat one of those teams to win a Super Bowl. Because, man, if the 49ers were in the AFC North, imagine, let's take out any team you want. Let's remove them from the AFC North and just put the 49ers over there and then say, hey, you got to get through the Texans and, whoever, the Chiefs, the Ravens, whatever. It's like, man, I wouldn't have any confidence in making the Super Bowl. But because they are in the NFC, it's like, Yeah, dude, I still think this team could make the Super Bowl for sure. Even though that we're technically losers on this list. Now, I'll say this. It is off-season fodder. You know, I've seen a lot of teams be winners in the offseason and not do anything. That if you've been an NFL fan, we've seen this, right? We've definitely seen this. There are definitely some off-season winners that don't actually turn into winners on the field. But if I'm just making an off-season list, for the most part, I agree with their winners. And for the most part, I agree with their losers. Here's the list that they had. They had the Bills, completely agree. I mean, talk about a team that is taking a major step back. Now, I think when you look at this for the Bills in particular, you're looking at a team that is a loser this offseason, but because of that, I think will be in the winner or could potentially be in the winner category next year, depending on who they bring in free agency and draft wise, because they're going to have a ton of money to play with, right? And depending on how this draft went, you draft well again next year, you bring in some good free agents, all of a sudden you could be a winner. And that's because you were a loser this offseason. But I agree, they were losers. I would say the Jags, I'm definitely on that. You know, the Jags paid their quarterback a lot of money, although I think that contract is very favorable for the Jaguars.
It's a good contract.
Considering it's a good contract. But you know, you lost Ridley to a division rival. You know, there's some moves they made as far as shoring up the trenches, but both the players they brought in on defense, Eric Armstead, Mitch Morse on offense, yeah, that shores up the trenches a little bit. But these are both guys that I believe have some injury history. I think Morse was like healthy for the first time in a while. So both these guys could miss a lot of games, and then all of a sudden you're screwed. The Cowboys absolutely deserve to be on this list, and they are. They did almost nothing. In fact, they just seem to subtract from their team. I don't know.
They added a big player, bro. They added
Who?
Zeke, bro. They added Zeke.
Yeah,
Let's give them that, bro. They
okay,
added
all
Zeke,
right,
bro.
yeah.
And they
okay,
they also took from the Niners, bro. They took Eric Hendricks. Like they did two big things. That's two big moves for the Cowboys. So put some respect on those guys. All right.
You're right. Totally fair. So the Cowboys on this list, deservedly so. The Panthers, for sure. I mean, they lost their best defensive player that they've had in a long time in Burns.
They should be on the list just alone for lying about S2 scores.
Yeah, that's the other thing, man. I mean, my gosh.
Missing on the quarterback. That's a big, like, that should
you deserve to lose for the next 5 off seasons because you missed on the quarterback. Yeah, I agree with that. But, you know, so the Panthers deserve to be here. So then the question is, do the 49ers, you know, I agreed with all their winners except for one. I do. I agree that the 49ers should be on this list because you're in an all-in season. Their explanation was, hey, you know, with your first round pick, you drafted a guy who's probably not going to contribute a ton in year one in Ricky Pearsall. No matter how good he eventually ends up being, he's most likely not going to contribute. And when you're this close to a Super Bowl, you probably want these guys to contribute. Although Wilkes was not a schematic fit, are you guaranteeing that you're getting an upgrade on defense with guys like Dre Greenlaw injured, Eric Armstead no longer here? You made some other changes, but you're also bringing in a first-time play caller. Are you guaranteed to get better on defense? There is no guarantee. And so, you know, I think on paper, the best argument you can make is that the 49ers stayed flat. I think you can certainly make an argument that they took a step back. I don't know that you can make the argument in good faith, and say that they took a step forward. That's just me. I'm making the argument that they stayed flat. The players changed, but they're flat. And I agree with you. For a team that is all in now, they would be on this list. However, what I want to say is the 49ers often win during the regular season close to the trade deadline, right? And this is why you don't just look at the offseason, because there is time for the 49ers to improve very significantly. And they seem to do this almost every season now. They're making a swing. And I love that about them because it gives you a little bit of excitement. You start looking at the trade deadline. You start looking around the league. You're like, all right, who's going to be available? Who are the 49ers going to call on? Who fits with this team? And you're almost guaranteeing that every year, because the 49ers do have this cap space to play with, they do have all their future picks, they're most likely going to make a trade at some point during the season. That easily can make them a big winner. Last year, that trade was Chase Young. Big time player. Didn't pan out, but they tried. You can't blame them for trying. The year before it was CMC. We know how great that was. So we've seen them do this. I believe they're gonna do it again during the season, and we'll see where it goes. But as far as just an off-season snapshot, yeah, I think they deserve to be on the list for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the list, like the reasons that they were put on this list, right? They talked about how drafting a receiver who won't be pretty much that dude until 2025 season. That's so true. Like if you're gonna have BA and Debo on the roster, that kind of was a wasted pick for a win now team. And like
Mhm.
you're pretty much taking that pick for a win now season or future season, my bad. So technically he doesn't truly matter this year. So it's not that big of an addition for this season coming on. Then they talk about losing Armstead and replacing him with Armstead and Javon Kinlaw and replacing him with Dieter Gross-Matos and Jordan Elliott. Talks about replacing, adding Leonard Floyd. I think that is the only player,
I love
Jesse,
Leonard Floyd, man.
that
I love
made the
Leonard
Niners
Floyd.
better.
Yeah.
Only player. In my opinion, that's the only player that made us better. Because you got Malik Collins, Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott. In my opinion, last year the Niners defensive line lacked depth. Their depth's better, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're winners, right? Like I do like them going
Okay,
out
well,
and signing.
okay, hold on. Let's look at this all in a vacuum real quick. Let's remove Floyd from the equation, right? We'll add him back in. I'm not going to make this unfair, but for now, if I just take Gross Matos,
Malik Collins,
Malik Collins, and who's the one from the Browns?
Jordan Elliott. Jordan
Elliott. Thank you. I was drawing a blank on his name. So Elliott, Collins, Gross Matos, and let's compare that with Young. Or not even Young. Who was the other guy? Who was number 5 on their team? Gregory. Who was it last year? Gregory, right?
Yeah, Gregory.
Yeah, Randy Gregory. We'll compare that to Randy Gregory, Kinlaw, and Armstead. Which 3 are better?
I'm going Armstead.
Yeah, me too. Okay, me too. Right? Like
I'm
I don't think I'm easily going with those 3. So that's a back step. Now we both agree that Floyd is certainly an upgrade over Chase Young. We agree with that.
Yeah.
But is that difference between Chase Young and Floyd enough to make up for that other trio that we just compared? I don't know that it is. I mean, Gross Matos has been injury prone for a big chunk of his career. I'll tell you, the Panther fans, let me say this, as bad as the Panthers are, you talk to Panthers fans, they were so excited to get rid of him. Now, maybe it's a mistake and they just don't know what good football looks like, but they were very excited to get rid of Gross Matos. So the fact that we're bringing him in expecting like he's just going to be this major difference maker and he's had trouble staying healthy, maybe he will be. But I think to project that based off of what he has been, I don't think that would be a fair projection.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it could be because it's Panthers fans. Like, what do they truly know?
It's
like,
hope,
yeah, it's like,
right? It's hope that he will.
Usually, too, as a fan, too, though, Jesse, and this is one thing I will add into there, like, because it is fans saying, "Oh, we're glad we got rid of a player." Most fans say that, like, they don't ever like lose a player. Like, they typically make an excuse on why it was a good decision to let someone go. Right? For example, Niner fans with Armstead, they were like, "Oh, he's been hurt constantly, but not good at all." He's a good player. He's a good player. Shows up in the playoffs,
but very good. But in the playoffs, he's extremely good. Dominant.
That's what you
yes,
pay
he
players.
is. Yeah. Yep.
When you talk to fans about Jordan Elliott, I hear run defender, pass rusher, gross, right? Malik Collins, pass rusher, can't stop the run. Guess what? If I'm on offense and I see Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave on the field, you know what I'm doing? I'm running right at those two guys. Yeah. Like, so realistically, how much better did your team get? Yeah, you did get more depth, but now you're lacking in some spots. You're lacking in the run defense when I think Armstead was good at both. So you couldn't just run the ball at those guys because he could stop the run, and in passing situations, he could get after the quarterback. So seeing the Niners in the losing category, I understand. They didn't make any big splash plays outside of Floyd. Now that does make them a lot better because if their defensive line is elite at getting after the quarterback, then you may see a better team. But again, the biggest teams you were competing with this offseason was the Packers and the Detroit Lions. The Packers are in the winning. The Detroit Lions are in the winning category on this set like bracket that was released by the Athletic, and for great reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Their secondary, their corners, buns, like bad, like really,
So
really
bad.
bad. So they went out and they traded for someone and they drafted one in the first round and one, I believe, the second or third.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive line, really, really bad. They went out and got DJ Reader, a really good defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Then to top it off, they do lose a guard and they replace him with another great guard. So it's like realistically, they got a lot better, in my opinion, because they're replacing. Yes, they are losing players, but they went out and they got players they truly needed to beat the Niners. My biggest
Well,
thing
I
is
mean, you look at their biggest loss was their left guard and Jonah Jackson, but they might have actually improved in Zeitler. Zeitler might be better than Jonah Jackson. So arguably.
I think he's better in the run game.
Yeah.
So you're getting a mauler. So like
yeah,
that's for me. Yes, you want to get your team better, right, in certain situations, but also you're building a team to win the Super Bowl, right? The Niners, who they just lost to the Chiefs. What did you do to get better to beat the Chiefs? Your offensive line struggled in this. The biggest, if you could ask any Niners fan, why did the Niners lose the Super Bowl? You could ask any random Niners fan. Majority of their answers, Jesse, are going to be the offensive line.
Yeah.
Did they upgrade their offensive line?
You want to know what the second thing is they're going to say? Receivers couldn't beat press man. What do? They go and draft a receiver whose biggest weakness is press man. So you literally drafted a receiver and said, hey, now that doesn't mean he can't get better at it, right? But right now, the only real knock against him, other than age, is that he struggles against press man. So what are we doing? What are we talking about here? No, they didn't. I don't think they did anything to get better to beat the Chiefs.
A lot of you see, I think it's funny how people are like, oh, they have a lot of felons. They get arrested a lot. Man,
okay.
I'm gonna say this, right? And I probably shouldn't say this.
And the one guy, by the way, that's been in the most trouble, I remember Rasheed Rice, whatever. The other guy hasn't even he's never played a snap for them, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
He's been on the practice squad or whatever.
For me, I'm going to say this, and it's kind of weird to say it because I probably shouldn't. If it's not a violent arrest or a violent whatever, like if it's not assaulting someone, animals, and stuff like that, it doesn't matter. You could get arrested for DUI, and you could be a great player as long as you didn't injure someone, as long as you didn't kill. Obviously.
Well, let's look at the team of the 90s. Who was the team of the 90s? The Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you want to talk about malcontents in the offseason and chaos in the offseason. It didn't get any worse than the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they were constantly in trouble. Okay.
So for me, that's my thing. Like if you could be getting in trouble, right? These dudes are human, man. They're regular dudes with money. That's how I see it. Like truthfully, that's how I see it. Now, if you're not doing anything outrageous, you're not like obviously the dudes that are hitting women and stuff like that, out, boom, get them out the league. Dudes that are hurting people, animals, out the league, boom, right, and stuff like that. But if you're getting arrested, and you got weed in the car, you got arrested for DUI.
Listen,
who cares? They're paid to play football.
This isn't the moral bowl. I'm sorry. We can judge them as people all you want, and I'll probably agree with most of your stances. But the Super Bowl isn't one off of morals and values and being a good guy. It's just not. It's not.
It's not. It's truly you need some of those dudes.
I agree with that. And you don't lose a Super Bowl in the offseason because you had a couple guys get arrested in the offseason. That's not. Otherwise, the Dallas Cowboys would have never won. And the Chiefs the Chiefs have kind of done this in the past. Like they've been in the news for these things. Andy Reid will take questionable characters in and hope that it pans out for him. He takes chances. That's just what he does. He's always been that way. He's always going to be that way. And I would say it's worked out pretty well for him. So,
and for the comments,
Yeah.
And for the comments that say, but they're role models, maybe you should be a role model for your
I
kid.
don't care. I don't care about
That's
that.
how I
I don't
see
care
it.
about
Maybe
that.
you should be a role model for your kid or
I don't
someone
care
in your
about that.
family. That's how I see it. That's just, and this is me going off on a rant, Jesse,
Yeah.
because to be honest, like truthfully, as long as you're a good player, who cares? Like, as long as you're not hurting anyone, doing anything sexually, doing any of that stuff, let's play ball.
Listen, I mean, again, if I'm talking about what's morally right and wrong, I mean, I'm a man of faith, right? And so of course I put all that stuff. It's kingdom over culture. Like that's the way that I've always been. But we're talking about football and athletics right now. And none of that stuff, as long as these players are available and on the field, and Rashee Rice may not be available for the beginning of the season. We'll see. There really hasn't been any whispers about a suspension, which is kind of weird to me. And so that may impact them. That may impact them. But assuming that all these players are back on the field for a playoff run, I mean, all this is off-season fodder that really isn't going to do anything to hurt their chances of winning a Super Bowl for the most part. So just on paper, when you look at what Kansas City did, you went and added 2 speedsters, something you haven't had. You've already got the possession receiver in Rashee Rice, who I doubt is going to be suspended all season. He'll be there at some point. You've got the possession guy in Kelsey. Now you got the 2 guys that can take the top off. You went and drafted your future left tackle. The left tackle you had was arguably the worst in the NFL as far as a starter went. So even if you are starting a rookie who probably needs some development, he's probably not going to be much worse if at all. And the defensive line, they went and bolstered. They lost L'Jarius Sneed. I would say on paper, the Chiefs have gotten better, though, from top to bottom. So I don't know, man. I mean, that's the team that won the championship. We're looking up at them. So we can poke fun at the morality and all that. They're going for ring number 3 in a row, and we're here wondering what the hell is going on, and if we're gonna win in our final year where we're gonna be truly eligible before we got to tear this thing down and go at it again. So, as a fan, I would rather have what they have right now. So that's just what it is.
And yeah, so like for me, like off season, right? Winners and losers. Winners and losers. Us being losers is not a good thing, man. Us not truly. I think this is the biggest year for the Niners organization since '94.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we could say every year, right? But truthfully, since '94, because you're gonna have to break up this regime next year at least, because you're gonna have to get rid of. You're gonna have to pay Brock. You're gonna have to do a lot of things. We look at teams that we cannot beat or were very close to us, and you put it in the chat. Hollywood Brown, right? That's how the Chiefs got better. They got better on. They needed receivers. They got receivers. They got Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy. They did things to get better at that spot. The Niners needed an offensive line. Didn't do nothing. Lions did what they did. We just talked about that. Why do you think the Niners didn't try to get better in certain situations? I think that's the why. We know they didn't do it. Why didn't they do it, Jesse? That's to me the bigger concern. Why didn't they do it?
It's interesting because so we talk about like, do they value? There's been this kind of divide in the fan base where some people say, hey, it just seems like they don't really value the offensive line. And you got other people will be like, well, they do. I mean, look, they drafted this guy here and they traded for Trent Williams and this and this and this. Well, I think we did get our answer. I mean, when Forrester comes out and basically says like, hey, if we're evaluating 2 guys and one of them is in the trenches and one of them is going to touch the ball, we're always going to go with the guy that touches the ball first. So clearly they value weapons more than they do offensive line. And most of the great teams over the course of the NFL are not built that way. They're just not. I mean, they're built through the trenches. They're built through protecting the quarterback and controlling the football and those types of things. And obviously elite quarterbacks win most of the time. That's true as well. But protecting the elite quarterback is extremely important. And that's how you build dynasties, is by doing that. And so I think that they have a fundamental flaw in how they build a Super Bowl winning roster, not a competitive roster, but a Super Bowl winning roster. And so far, that's proven out. And that's why they're able to get close because they are so talented. But getting over the edge, everything's got to go well. And you got to have, in my opinion, you've got to be able to win in the trenches. And they're almost at a disadvantage every single week, regardless of the defensive line that's lined up across from them. It's almost a guaranteed disadvantage. Our offensive line versus whoever the opponent's defensive line is, especially when you get to the playoffs and you're playing really good players, you're pretty much at a disadvantage there outside of Trent Williams. So that's a big deal, man. It's a really, really big deal to me.
And what's crazy is when Forrester did say that, right? At first I was okay, I get what he's saying. Like, yes, I could find you some quality offensive linemen in rounds 4, right? 3, 4, 5. I could find those kind of guys. The thing is, I feel like the Niners don't know how to draft offensive line. I feel like they don't know how to evaluate offensive line. That's, to me, that's the bigger issue. Rather than, okay, what guys have you drafted that you think could be good? Because you're saying that you could develop them, right? But I don't think they had any good guys they could draft. Like, none of those guys they drafted had traits that I'm like, okay, like he could be developed as a guy. So looking at it, you have teams that have won it, right? The Chiefs. When he said that, I was like, wait, the Chiefs just won with honestly, no talent on offense in the receiving room to score touchdowns. Like, if we're being honest, they should not have been in the playoffs.
And an elite interior offensive line, too.
Their O-line is elite. And what made them a really good football team was that O-line. Giving Mahomes that extra little bit of time. That's, to be honest, that's what won them games.
Their defense was
their defense was obviously
really good.
Obviously, was elite. But when it came down to the crunch time, when it came down to Mahomes in the playoffs and them having to make a play, their O-line man, he had time. You could wait 4 to 5 seconds and someone's getting open eventually. So I think that's, for me, I don't know. I think more so I took you on a rant, or I went on a rant, but I don't like.
Well, I mean, let's look at success. I mean, we could go year by year, but last year, the 3 of the final 4 teams, Detroit, arguably the best offensive line in football. Oh, Chiefs and Ravens, that's arguably number 2 and number 3 offensive lines. So that's right there. 3 of the 4 teams had elite offensive lines of who was remaining. You know what I mean? And we could go year by year. I'm not saying that you're guaranteed if you have an elite offensive line. There's so much that goes into. First of all, quarterback is the most important. Let's get that out of the way. If you have an elite offensive line and a crappy quarterback, I'd rather have an elite quarterback and a mediocre or crappy offensive line, personally.
But I don't know. We could look at.
I don't think we have either. So
at that point, we could look at the Lions.
Yeah,
we could look at the Lions like they don't have an elite quarterback, but they have an elite offensive line.
They have one of the 2, though, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Right.
I thought you were saying like you can't win if you don't have. Okay. I get what you're saying.
No, you can. I'm just saying, if give me my chances with the elite quarterback, right? Like that's where it starts. To me, the way you build the team: a quarterback, protect the quarterback, get after the quarterback. That's the order of importance. So the quarterback is more important. Then it's the offensive line. That's the second most important. And then it's your defensive line. To me, that's how I would build a roster. And I think if you look through the history of the NFL, I would say that probably holds true more so than elite wide receivers and elite corners with terrible trenches. If you have terrible trenches and you're elite on the outside, I don't think that's a recipe to win. I don't.
And what's weird, it just blows my mind because the Niners, when they initially were hired, they said they wanted their trenches to be elite. Like, they build a defensive line. Like, why would you build a defensive line and not an offensive line? Like, does that make sense? Like, but
Kenny says boombox guy is most important, which is fair. I didn't even think about that. Good point. That's a good point.
I like Steve-O's question right under it. Fair. The head coach or QB, which is more important?
Oh, head coach. I mean, excuse me, QB, quarterback.
I would say it's, oh man, situationally. I think it's situationally because you could have a bad head coach, but an elite quarterback, and I think that elite quarterback is going to make up for a lot of flaws of that head coach. Versus in some situations, you could have a really elite coach and a bad quarterback, and he can make up for him. For example, look at Kyle, look at Jimmy, right? And
It's
then
true.
so
I think it can go
he can
both
make up
ways,
both ways. Like
but
that's what I'm saying. Like a
yeah,
situation, like
yeah.
it does. I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. I think it's situationally because we could argue that
I
Drew
think
Brees
dynasty
made
wise, you need both, really. If you're gonna have a dynasty
dynasty.
and win, 3 rings in 4 years or 3 and 5, you probably need both. And usually if you do that, then both are gonna get credit whether they deserve it or not, right? So, that's a part of it as well. But
Yeah,
yeah,
like
I would say Drew Brees made Peyton.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying. Like, right? Like
yeah,
people like they talk about how Sean Payton like being an elite coach. It's like an elite coach is gonna go somewhere. He's gonna look good. Now we don't know what he's gonna look in
yeah.
with or is he with the
Denver.
Broncos? Yeah, we don't know what he's
Yeah.
gonna look like with the Broncos, but the moment he lost as an offensive guy, the moment he lost Drew Brees, that team wasn't the same. So
Yeah.
like you
Of
can't
course.
make the argument for like, for example, Bill. Bill's defenses were always elite. Like
Mhm.
there was never one year that Bill wasn't there that they weren't a top 10 defense.
Even last year with all the injuries they had, they were still a top tier defense. Yeah.
So it's like for me, like that's what makes he's an elite defensive coach. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I think it's both. You really truly situationally you need both.
Yeah, I mean, you really could go year by year, and I'm sure you can find anomalies. I just think I would say more often than not, teams that won usually had pretty good O lines. I would say confidently 80% of teams that have won the Super Bowl have had really good O lines, more so than teams that have won with really good receiving cores and crappy O lines. Like you can find teams that weren't great on the outside and great on the interior more so than you can find teams vice versa. I don't think talent, the further you get away from the ball, the less important you are, in my opinion.
I agree.
So
And that's why I think center is the most important position on the O line.
yeah, I can make an argument
It's
for that
up
too.
there like
Frank,
that left tackle
yeah,
center or whatever, but
especially in our offense where they call plays, they call protections and whatnot. So Frank Tom Ocean says, "Hey Jesse, hope you're healing well, brother. I am. Thank you so much, man. Knee surgery went fantastic. It was just a scope. I was walking within 24 hours. Get my stitches out tomorrow. Couldn't be better. So thank you." Dazza says, aside from Floyd, what have the 49ers shown that we were all in this season? And where have we dramatically improved? We barely made it past the first round of the playoffs last year. I think we just had the whole conversation, Dazza, and I think we kind of agree with you. Um, Shady Luke says San Fran doesn't value top tier offensive line. This is an Eagles fan, by the way, because Shanahan has his offensive mind and his zone running scheme, and that's top concern in a primary fullback. No, it's true. It's very, very true. But, it's again, a lot of people praise Kyle Shanahan because half the league's running his system. Let's ease back a little bit. Who of his guys, since he has most of the league that he's birthed, you would think that they would have a ring, right? But who of his guys have won a ring? McVay wasn't his guy. McVay was his dad's guy. And McVay, if we're just keeping it a buck, abandoned the scheme to go win the Super Bowl. He turned into a 3 wide receiver, pass heavy team. That's what he did to go win a ring. He abandoned the run game and that style to go win his. So even he did something different. But
and
you
even
look at,
he, Jesse, this
yeah,
offseason made sure his interior O line is elite. Like they might have the
that's
best
true. They
interior O
did. Yeah.
line in the league, man.
Yeah, they do. Miami's a great example of this, of talking about extremely good exterior players and not great interior players. They're the perfect example of this. I mean, I don't know if it gets I believe they probably have the best receiver duo in the league. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Then they drafted a young guy who's supposed to be good. They brought in OBJ, who's probably a shell of himself. But as far as their just 2 top receivers, the best in the league. Offensive lines week, how many playoff wins do they have? a big fat 0. So it's like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Anyways, we can have this conversation all day. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Much love to all of you. I hope you have a blessed weekend. I'm going to be traveling to Oregon over the weekend. I'll be there for the next few weeks. So streaming is going to be a little bit sporadic from me. But I will be streaming for sure while I'm gone. But just know the schedule is going to be a little off. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks away from the house. Bear with me. Appreciate all of you for tapping in. You guys are great. Much love. Stay blessed. And by the way, Marco, thank you so much for doing these shows with me. Shady Luke says, Mom just had knee surgery today. Second knee. Ice up, Jesse. Yeah, icing. Stretching is a big deal too. Big deal. All right, y'all. Stay blessed. Peace.